fact that whatever we sent in to the Pentagon was only one way. We rarely, if ever, got any kind of feedback other than, well, that was a good report. And that was it. So we never had any real feedback that we could use for comparison purposes, which, you know, was fairly frustrating. But the Pentagon would block all information from coming back. It was very, very frustrating, but we kept on doing, we collected as much information as we could from any source that we could. One of the sources that I had, one of the prisoners that I had, was a kid. He was about 15. Talked to him for great length, and he had been dismissed any number of times through his time as a prisoner, because they figured, well, he's a kid, he doesn't have any information, he's worthless. So I talked to him to practice my Lao, and took him back all the time to when he was picked up by the Tet Lao and was part of their service. Lo and behold, I took him through each one of his little locations, and one of his locations was in a cave. And I said, well, what was in the cave? And he said, rice. And I said, well, was it growing there, or was it in bags, or what? So he says, oh, it was in bags. I said, okay. So he had no basis for defining space or height or any measurements. So I had to walk him through it. And at any rate, by the time I finished, we determined that this cave was loaded from bottom to top with food supplies, with uniforms, with weapons, with ammunition, everything that you can imagine to carry out the spring offensive. And as it turned out, this was the cave which had all the supplies for the spring offensive in 1973. Lo and behold, we had it all, and we sent in people to replace the North Vietnamese guards and communicators, took over the cave, took over all the supplies, carted it out, and that was the end of the spring offensive for Laos. There was no spring offensive that year. So at least we did something good. But let me move on to something near and dear to your hearts. And that's a guy called John McCain. And one of my guys was another NVA officer. And during the conversations on prisoners, he said, we read about John McCain in your newspapers. He says, why do you regard him as a hero? I said, well, you know, he's a big name, and supposedly he's, a prisoner, and he's undergoing torture, lots of bad things. He says, no. He says, he's living pretty well. The other prisoners are not doing so well, but John McCain, he's doing quite well. He gets along well with the commandant, and he gets along with the KGB officers from Russia that are there. I said, well, how well does he get along? He says, well, he volunteered to be their recruit. I'm going, well, that's kind of interesting. I said, what do you mean he volunteered to be their recruit? He volunteered, to say, I'll do whatever you want. And so the other American prisoners were also aware of this, because he would greet incoming prisoners to try to convince them to cooperate with the North Vietnamese interrogators. So this was kind of an upsetting thing for me. Here's one of my heroes who's not a hero anymore. He became the original Manchurian candidate. Saying, all right, so I wrote it up. And had I gotten it from only one, that would have been, highly questionable. We would put it in as we called an F6 report, kind of low-grade, second-hand information. But the guy was credible. But I learned this from two other NVA officers, and with separate questioning. sent it up, and I got this nasty note back from the Pacific Command Intelligence Division saying, you know, McCain's father is the commander of the Pacific Command, and we don't want to see any more of this stuff, any more of these lies. I said, I send in what I get. So one of my other credible sources was, I met a North Vietnamese commander in the field, and my counterpart in Laos said, you know, what information are you really interested in, you know, other than the equipment and so on? I said, well, you know, prisoners. He says, well, how about if I get you some of that information? I said, okay. He says, let's go for a chopper ride. Got on a Huey, off we went. We went probably for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and so we're flying along. I've got my legs hanging off the side, and so he leans over and says, look at this map and tell me if you know where we are. I looked at it, looked for the area points. And I said, well, according to this map, we're here. So he says, open it up. So I opened it up. We're about 50 miles west of Hanoi, well within North Vietnam. And I said, well, you know, this is a bad thing. I think I've just been captured. So we landed in this clearing. And I'm figuring, well, my counterpart has really done me in now. So he wanders out the middle of the field. Pretty soon, a couple of NVA soldiers come wandering out. An NVA officer comes wandering out, a colonel. And I'm going, this can't be good. So pretty soon, roughly a battalion-sized organization surrounded my counterpart and this NVA colonel. And I said, oh man, I'm not going to enjoy the Hanoi Hilton at all. So I got up there and wandered up. My guy is like, oh, money. So I went out and he says, you don't need your gun. I said, obviously. So went out. He says, I'd like you to meet my good friend, so-and-so. I said, well, okay, glad to meet you, Dai. He says, so, now what? He says, well, my friend here says that he's perfectly willing to help you gain the information that you want. He says, what would you like? He says, I understand you have an interest in prisoners. I said, you're right, I do. I said, how willing are you to help me? He says, I will do whatever my friend asks me to do. I said, okay. So they all came from the same general village during the French occupation. So he says, what do you want? I said, I want the names of all American prisoners, alive or dead. If they're alive, I want to know who you have and where they are imprisoned and what's the status of their health. And if they're dead, I want to know where the bodies are buried. Okay, when do you need it? I said, as soon as you can get it. He says, come back in a few weeks and I'll have it for you. So in a few weeks we went back. Landed in the same clearing, surrounded by all these smiley faces of the North Vietnamese soldiers who I was, bound to determine these were the bad guys. He hands me a package, says, here's all the information. Thank you very much. He says, if you need anything else, come back and I will help you out again. So this was the interface that we had between Americans and North Vietnamese, none of which really made it into the press or into the official files, because having encountered a lot of nasty business out of the Pacific Command, I decided I would make this guy into a prisoner who gave me reports on his own. And he was just a low-level guy, but he had served as a guard rather than a high-ranking North Vietnamese Army officer. Because I knew damn well that if I reported that, it would go back through Saigon and then we'd get back up to North Vietnam and this guy would be dead in a heartbeat. because I didn't trust our system, I didn't trust the South Vietnamese system at all. At any rate, all that information went directly back to DIA, bypassing the Pacific Command. And God only knows what happened to it. Never heard another word. Nobody said a word about it. Not one. Here you've got every name that you want. You've got the location of every prisoner, American prisoner in Vietnam. You have status. You have everything you could ask for. Give me more requirements. Not a word. So that was the status back then.
What year was that?
This was 73.
73?
Mm-hmm.
Post Paris Peace Accords.
Yeah. So, those were the filters that we had to go through. Again, further on, as I tried to figure out what had happened when I got to the Pentagon and became a bureaucrat myself, my co-worker, Wick Turrison, Sedgwick D. Turrison III, probably one of the best Vietnamese speakers, translators in the military. He had ended up at the Pentagon as the head of the Office of POWs and MIAs. And it wasn't a big office at that time. It was a very small, squalid office. But I would go in and talk to him and say, you know, what have you got? Anything back on the prisoners? He says, well, we get a lot of junk. He says, I'm still looking for the intelligence reports that we submitted from Laos. He says, I can't find them. He says, nobody will tell me where they are. All right. So I said, what's your holdup here? And this was around the 80s. He says, somebody in Congress has screwed it up. He says, I can't get it. He says, my upper levels are afraid of somebody in Congress. Finally came out that the guy that they were afraid of was McCain. McCain had put in all these barriers to getting this information. I said, for what reason? He says, well, he says, you know as well as I do, he says, the other prisoners don't like him. And the validation of that was a piece of my unit, one of the detachments in my intelligence unit out of Bangkok, was the 17th Military Intelligence Detachment, which was primarily counterintelligence. And from that unit, they sent 3 armed special agents to fly back from Hanoi with all the American prisoners. And they were all armed, and they were there to protect McCain from the other prisoners. And they came back and they said, you know, these guys really, really hate McCain. They figure he's a double. Amazing. And so that was the background on McCain. So there you have it. That's pretty much everything in a nutshell. And I probably carried on a little bit too long, but if you've got any questions, I'm not going to reveal any secrets. That's not my deal. My deal is to clarify open material that's already been reported. Everything I've told you, other than the fact that Kane was recruited by the KGB.
When you got those lists of names, did you manage to even get an approximate count as to the number?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember. It was a stack of documents like this, and it was regarded as so urgent. There should be no delay in getting this forward, that we dispatched it by aircraft the following day. So we didn't have a chance to go through the whole thing. But this was apparent. This, according to my NVA officer, this was the entire list of everybody.
When the 1205 document came out, did you form an opinion as to whether that was valid or suspect?
I don't know that I ever had access to the 1205 document. I was in a different realm.
Well, it didn't have names, it just had a number.
I can't give you that answer because I don't know.
Okay.
I'd love to be able to BS you, but I can't. So, that's the nasty part of the whole thing. Now, one of the issues there is that we had a large contingent of American military in Laos and Cambodia. And because it was the secret war, it wasn't a secret. Everybody in the universe knew about the secret war except the American people and the VA. And the problem with that is that if you're in a special operations element, or if you are an intelligence element in covert operations, technically all of your records are sealed. So you don't get those records into your official file. So when you go to apply for VA benefits, they'll say, well, where were you? And you say, well, I was in Laos. We were never in Laos. We were never in Cambodia. I talked to a shrink one day. He says, yeah, he says, I got this guy who claims he was in Cambodia. We didn't have anything going on in Cambodia. And I said, was he a little guy? He said, yeah, a little guy. I said, did he have a little side pack with nunchucks in it? He says, yeah. What would you make me say that? I said, well, he worked for me. He was a spotter. He was a spotter for B-52s that dropped bombs. I said, he was over there for 3 years, all alone. If he acts a little weird, it was because he'd sit there and watch these bombs drop and probably lose half of his eardrums. But he was good. But had I not happened to talk to this shrink, VA shrink, the guy would still be sitting in a rubber room somewhere and getting no benefits at all. No treatment, anything. We've got thousands of these people around the world in special operations units, SEALs, Air Force Special Operations, Army Special Forces, Marines, everybody in these covert operations. Now we've got a whole slew of them in Africa. And we've got a very large contingent in Southeast Asia again. Very large. The problem is, if these people get captured, if these people have illnesses resulting from their time in these areas, VA won't touch them. And so what I've been trying to do is get an office in VA which can work with an office in the Pentagon saying, I've got Joe Shimolian, here's his serial number, and we don't need to know where he was or what he was doing. We don't need to know any classified information. We just need to know, is he eligible for, VA benefits because he was in a combat situation. So I talked to the head of the VA, and unfortunately I talked to him just before he was fired, so that didn't work. Nonetheless, still working on that particular aspect. It's one of those things that these are ongoing issues. They've been ongoing, for our lifetimes. People who are captured and you never hear from them again. You're 61 guys. You've got people who were captured in Korea that nobody ever heard from again. They ended up in some gulag in Russia, or North Korea, or China. So those are things that we need to fix, and I'm trying to do it from behind the scenes. But one of the things that I do is I write this blog. The blog has a pretty good distribution. So I get readers all over the world, to include in Russia. None from China, but a lot of them from Russia and the Ukraine. And these are people who can give us feedback. So one of the things that I'll try to do is take some of the stuff that I picked up during this conference here and create a blog. I'll run it by you to fact check for me. And we'll put it up there and we'll see if we can't get some feedback here. Questions? Oh, all right.
Use the microphone. Before my mom makes you one.
What carries it too?
Early on in the war in Vietnam, I understand that the South Koreans were fighting along with the South Vietnamese. And there were reports that they were capturing Russians.
The Russians.
Yeah, and did that information get buried? Because I know the South Koreans were so effective that we kicked them out back to South Korea.
Oh, they're incredibly good soldiers.
Yeah, and so they went back early, and I think it was the same thing with the Australians. There were an Australian detachment in South Vietnam, and they were very effective also. And but the excuse for these Russians was that they were not combatants, but they were operating the anti-aircraft SAM sites, and that's,
Right.
yeah. But according to the South Koreans and the Australians, they were combatants.
Oh,
Yeah.
They also, would fly occasional sorties in the MiGs.
Yeah.
So basically, it was a proxy war.
Yeah.
Basically, it was against the United States against Russia. We dealt with old Soviet equipment. Some of it came from China, but most of it was Soviet equipment. I think I mentioned we captured one of their late model tanks, the T-80, which was not introduced in Europe until 10 years after the war. We captured one of their test bed vehicles in Laos. So we shipped that back to Fort Detrick for reverse engineering. But I mean, everything was there from the Soviet Union.
Two questions. Do you know Jerry Mooney? He worked with the NSA, and he tracked information that came over the different